So, you want to know how to revise your book from a draft 1 to draft 2. You came to the right video. First, a quick disclaimer. When I first finished my book, I couldn't find anything about how to revise my book and get my first draft to my second draft. And I hope that this video is the video that I would have needed at that time. If there's advice in here that discourages you from writing, then that is not my intent, and take it or leave it. The first thing to do is to make a revision guide. You finish your book. You take maybe just a week break or however long you need, and you come at your book with no judgment. And that's going to be hard because it seems like this is the time to turn on all the judgment and to do all the things right. And I've noticed that if you do that, sometimes it's a little bit like a floodgate and you can just start destroying your book in this process instead. So to make a revision guide, I write down all the chapters that are in my book. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, all the way to Chapter 40 or however many chapters there might be. And what I do is I reread my book. And again, if you need to take a longer break to be able to reread your book, that's fine too. Now, when you're rereading your book, to make the revision guide, you're going to make 1 page or half a page per chapter, and you're going to have a title called Summary and another title called What I Want to Change. And in the summary, you're just going to summarize the chapter you wrote in as few words as possible. So in a paragraph, think 4 sentences or less, 100 words, make it easy. And all you're going to write is like what happened, what plot arcs might happen. And often I'll just write like this person goes here, they go here. And what you're doing is you're making a way to edit your book at a glance as this process goes. So you're going to do that for all the chapters, and that's really important. That way, when you are looking through your revision guide, you can kind of see the plot arc. So you'll be like, oh, he went here, and then went here, and then went here. And this allows you to edit things like plot. So don't do any line editing. As you're rereading your book, don't fix the grammar. Don't do things like that because you might delete entire chapters. You might remove and replace or rewrite entire chapters. And this is the point where we're just no judgment, no work. We're just going through and writing a summary. And then the next step under that is what I want to change. For that, what you're going to do is you're going to write, again, just 1 paragraph, maximum of 100 words, of one thing you might want to change. And we're not talking about grammar here. It could be grammar, but try to not do grammar because we're going to turn that part of our brain on later. And you're just going to write one thing to change. That is not grammar related, but that's story related. So sometimes it's like, oh, this piece of technology didn't come across the way I wanted, or this plot element felt a little murky, this part felt boring. Sometimes I'll write something like, oh, I want the character to have a more emotional reaction in this scene. And you're just going to focus on changes like that for that chapter, if that makes sense. And then if you get carried away, try to just bring it back and just maybe write some notes of what ideas you have and make sure you kind of title those notes. Do something like italicize them or comment on it, or if you're writing pen and paper, which is a really fun way to do it too, just write note and then go to the side and do it. All right, and now that should take you about 15 to 30 minutes per chapter. It's really easy if you just do 1 chapter a day. I wouldn't push yourself more than that, but if you can commit to just doing 1 chapter a day of writing a summary and maybe 1 or 2 things that you would like to change just to make it a better story. Again, trying to not be critical. I think as an author, whenever I read a book, I could read a chapter and someone could say, would you change anything? And I could be like, yeah, I guess it'd be a little bit more exciting to me if this happened, or stuff like that. And that's kind of the energy we're tapping into, is just the friendly banter talking about a book. Because when we talk about books we love, we talk about things we liked or didn't like and what things were interesting to us. And that's just the information we're collecting right now, is not only what is your book about, but what things stand out to you and what things are good. Now we're on step 3. Your revision guide is done. Subscribe. No, actual step 3. So once you have your revision guide, what we're going to do is make some notes on your revision guide. So just glance through what you've written, glance through the summaries, glance through what you want to change, and see if there's any like plot arcs you want to add in here. When I revised my book, Cool You Mustachio, I was surprised that I wanted to add in a whole nother arc, and that involved rewriting chapters and writing chapters. I just felt like the motivation was really weird for Coolio Mustachio. So on one of the what do you want to fix things, I wrote fix his motivation so it makes sense why he goes here. And to do that, I actually added in this whole Hero Hunter arc that was about 15 to 20,000 words. And I also cut 15 to 20,000 words in that process. And so I just wrote in my outline draft, and as I was rewriting any chapter that had that in there, I would write like an abbreviation each A so that I would remember got to that chapter like, oh, I need to add that in there a little bit. And the rewriting wasn't that strenuous, but it was so much easier to, before I got into the nitty gritty line by line, chapter by chapter, to see that I needed to add in these 20,000 words. And so that's what you're going to do. You're going to look through your revision guide and find any plot arcs that you want to fix or add in, and kind of find those multiple chapter changes, if that makes sense. You can do this in two ways. You can, once you have all those changes added to your revision guide that are multiple chapter changes, you're either going to go chapter by chapter and start revising, or you're going to go by those multiple chapter changes and do those first. And I kind of did a mix of both. I did one or two of the multiple chapter changes that were bigger and went through and kind of reread those chapters and then rewrote some of them. And some of them I didn't have to do much more rewriting. I had to like maybe delete like 5 paragraphs or half a page and then just kind of like steer the steam in the direction that made more sense. And you're just going to do those changes first. So you can either go chapter by chapter, or you can do those multiple chapter changes first. And maybe this will come as a surprise to you, but revising does require you to do a lot of rereading. So if you're not up to revising your book right now, maybe challenge yourself to read some books by some newer indie authors, or something that might not be as polished as you're used to reading, because those books still have merit, in my opinion. Maybe focus on reading some books from a friend or some writing from a friend, and promise to not give any like negative critique on them, and just kind of build your tolerance for rereading. Now, how I do this when I go chapter by chapter is I will take my original book document, my original draft, and I will create a completely new blank draft. And then what I do, and this is just how it works for me, is I will copy and paste only 3 chapters at a time. To me, with dyslexia and with ADHD, this just kept the project from feeling overwhelming and helped me focus on kind of still the bigger picture while I start to introduce some light line by line editing. I wouldn't go full on 20 minutes per page yet. To me, that's kind of what an editor is for, is to like really mull over those words. So what you're going to do to create your draft 2 is you have your revision guide, you have your notes, you probably have some changes too to the bigger story. And now you're just going to make the story of what you intended to write all along. And so you're going to take that revision guide, you're going to copy and paste the first 3 chapters, and then you're going to look at those first 3 pages of your revision guide, and then that's your goal for either that day or for the next 3 days or for that week, however you want to do it. And I would just take it kind of 3 chapter segments and then rinse and repeat. As I copy and paste the 3 chapters, what I'm doing is I am rereading, and when I get to those changes in my revision guide that I want to make, I start deleting and revising. And this is also where I allow myself to fix typos. I allow myself to fix some line editing. My personal goal when I'm doing line editing at this stage is to only really like rework grammar and sentences like 5 to like probably I would say at a frequency of once per page, where it's going to make the most impact. Where I'm like, ooh, that's really, really bad. Like that's hard for me to read. And I knew what I was trying to write, so I'm going to revise that. So I would focus on just clarity instead of polishing at this point. That is the main thing we're focusing on. And at this point, you can, if you need to do a little bit more line editing, that's okay too. I think that's fine, especially in the chapters where you're not rewriting as much. I would still spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe try to limit yourself to 30 minutes on just line editing, rewriting, doing things like making sure every paragraph and every sentence doesn't start with the same word or whatever your grammar style should be. What I like to do is when I am revising, if you're in a program like Google Docs and you're using a document outline, you can change the header to a different heading and it will show up in kind of a different column. And so any chapter that I finished, I'll have as like heading 3, and then any of the next 3 chapters that I still need to work on will be heading 1. And to me, that just keeps things nice and neat and orderly. I don't know how to do this in other programs, but I'm sure there's equivalent things you can do. You could change the color of the text if it's finished or something like that, because we're just trying to focus on clarity and get through. After 40 days, 50 days, however long it takes you to do this process, maybe 100 days, you should have a draft 2. Woohoo! You officially have a draft 2. You can brag about that. I'd say only 1 in a million people that set out to write a draft 1 finish it from beginning to end, and I would say maybe even like 1 in 400,000, 500,000 people that write a draft 1 actually make a draft 2. And so pat yourself on the back. That is a huge accomplishment. And now is the time to develop some thick skin, because now you feel like you might feel pretty good about your book, and that's great. Enjoy that feeling. The thing with books is almost 1 million of them are published every year, and only like less than 1% sell over 1,000 copies. And so if you want to be an author, and if you want to be successful, you're going to have to strive for that kind of good book. You're going to want to make this the best you can, because it is a really hard market to break into. Drafts 3 and 4, I'll give a brief outline of what that looks like anyways. Draft 3 is after you send your book out to beta readers. So take your draft 2, make a copy of it, send it out to some trusted friends. And this is just tell them to make notes of any parts that were confusing or that they didn't understand, and try to keep their focus on that versus things that are maybe interest-based. So I say, tell me parts that you find boring, tell me parts that you don't understand what's happening, and tell me parts where you're confused, or if you've noticed on your revision guide that you have a problem with like sense of place, say, hey, note it, tell me if in your mind all you're envisioning is a white room for these characters. And that type of information is really helpful. And once they finish, you can read all that information, and as long as you're in a place where you're not getting sensitive over that, then you can work on that book. If you're still getting sensitive over that project, it's time to start a new book and come back to it later. That's how I personally get past criticism sensitivity, is by working on a new project and then coming back and bouncing back and forth. It's kind of fun for me to have one in draft 1, one book that's in draft 2, one book where I'm making a revision guide, and maybe, so on and so forth. And I would say that's a really good method, because it's going to take time for some beta readers. If you're struggling with having beta readers read that section of your book, I would maybe reach out to different people. You can find some online writing communities. You can do some author exchanges. If a person's struggling with reading it and they say, well, I just didn't understand this and I couldn't get past this, then maybe just like spoil the book for them and just tell them, oh, this is how that was meant to go in my head. Don't get defensive and stuff, but just anything to help them get through it. If they don't get through it, that's a-okay. You're just going to take what you can get at this point. We are unpaid writers. We've already put hundreds of hours of work in this, so we're just taking what we can get. After you have some of that kind of bigger feedback again on like, oh, I stopped liking the character after this event happened, or couldn't focus because I was the whole time wondering if this character was this tall or this tall. Once you get that type of feedback, you can go in and make those changes pretty quick. It's mostly, again, focusing on clarity. And at this point, when you're making those changes, feel free to get distracted by line editing. It is your friend at this point. You do not need to shy away from it once you are taking advice from beta readers and revising it. What we're doing with the second draft is we're just making the book readable. And then on the third draft, what we're doing is we're making the book enjoyable. And once you have the third draft, then you either do another round of beta reading, or at this point, you're ready to start querying your book. And again, at this point, we have done probably what I would say 50% of the line editing that is needed total in your whole book. And to get to a fourth draft or a fifth draft, a fourth draft is acceptable to do another round of beta reading and another round of light line editing for yourself. And then I would say at this point, if you're at 4 drafts in, 5 drafts in, and this is where we need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. I've had friends that have gotten stuck on draft 13, draft 15, and I'm like, it's been 10 years. You need to write a new book. And that is a really big pitfall in revising that I would warn about. The way to get around this is I would just okay, I'm in the querying phase. I'm not going to change anything until I send out 100 queries, 200 queries. Set that goal for yourself. Do 5 a day, do how many ever a day. Those rejections suck, We all get them. It's like a job interview nowadays. You send out, 200 applications. You might only get 4 interviews. You might only get 4 non-automated responses. And I would just send those queries out to any of the big 5 publisher agents. You can have ChatGPT make a list of agents for the genre that you would like. If you don't like ChatGPT, which I don't, you're just going to have to do some good old research online. Drafts 5 and 6 are go-betweens with your editors. I always would say leave at least 2 drafts for your editor, 1 for their initial notes, make a new draft, 2 for any other notes they have, and then at that point, you're just polishing and refining until you have your draft 5, 6, or 7. I'd say most authors that are successful do at least 5 to 10 drafts of their books. I think if you're doing more than that, I would keep a close eye on how much time you've spent on it, because to be a successful author in this day and age, you do need to be publishing a book about, I would say, once every 2 years or less. And if you want to check out any of my writing, I have some published on Amazon. They are short stories. All of my projects are currently between the 1st and 4th draft. As of this week, I have an editor that I'm working with on my novella, which makes me very, very happy. And that means I think within a year, I will have my first novella published. And it's like the first time you write the book, the first time you finish writing a first draft, the second time you make a first draft, you will go twice as fast. And I've noticed the same as for revising. The first time I revised a book, it took me forever. The second time I revised a book, I kind of knew what I was doing and went twice as fast. And I hope this was helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe. I hope you have a good day. Bye.